The heat of the New World gripped the travelers as soon as they stepped off the ship, the air thick with humidity and the scent of earth and wild growth. The jungle stood like an ancient sentinel before them, its towering trees draped with vines and leaves that glistened in the fading light. Each step forward seemed to pull them deeper into its embrace. Elowen took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of magic in the air. It was unlike anything she had encountered before, a strange and potent energy that hummed under her skin. She could almost see the threads of power weaving through the trees, invisible yet undeniable. This was why she had come. This was what she had been searching for her entire life. The mysteries of the New World were calling to her, offering secrets that could change everything she knew about magic and the world itself.
Stay close.
Kael's voice rumbled behind her, grounding her thoughts. He was a man of faith, but there was a hint of unease in his voice that Elowen hadn't expected. She turned and saw his expression, the way his eyes flicked from the shadowed jungle to the dimming sky above. The weight of his holy symbol seemed heavier here, like it had begun to radiate a faint warmth, as if even the gods were uncertain of the path ahead.
We're not alone.
Kael said softly.
I can feel it. Something stirs in this land.
I'm sure it's just your imagination.
Thorne quipped from the back of the group, his voice laced with amusement.
But if you're right, I hope it's something with a lot of treasure to give.
He grinned, the tip of his dagger glinting in the fading light. Thorne had been the last to step off the ship, stretching his limbs as he surveyed the jungle with his usual nonchalance. His black leather armor creaked with every movement, and his fingers drummed idly on the hilt of his sword. Though he was more than capable with a blade, he wasn't one to jump into danger without a plan, or without knowing there was something worth taking. Elowen shot him a sidelong glance.
This isn't a treasure hunt, Thorne. We're here for more than just gold.
Thorne raised an eyebrow.
You're here for knowledge, I'm here for wealth. Let's not pretend we don't all have our reasons for being here.
He gave her a wink, then shifted his attention back to the path ahead. Kael didn't respond to the banter. His mind was already elsewhere, his eyes scanning the jungle around them. The trees seemed to move in strange ways, their branches bending and twisting in the windless air. It wasn't the natural sway of branches caught in a breeze, but something else, something that made his skin prickle, as if the very land was watching them. The trio continued deeper into the jungle, each step a mix of wonder and trepidation. Elowen's heart raced with anticipation as the jungle seemed to open before them, revealing an ancient path worn by the feet of those who had walked before them, perhaps the very first settlers of this forgotten world. They traveled in silence for a time, each of them preoccupied with their own thoughts. Elowen studied the trees, the strange symbols carved into their bark, their leaves shimmering with a faint, otherworldly glow. Her fingers tingled with the urge to cast a spell, to study the magical essence that flowed through the land, but she resisted. She didn't want to reveal too much of her power just yet. Kael, for his part, prayed under his breath, his hands resting on the silver sunburst pendant around his neck. He had always trusted in his faith, but there was something unsettling about this place. The divine presence he usually felt so strongly was muted here, as if the gods themselves were distant, unsure of what was happening in this forgotten land. Thorne, on the other hand, kept a careful eye on the foliage, always on the lookout for something valuable, or something dangerous. His gaze flicked from tree to tree, his mind constantly calculating risks and rewards. He wasn't much for magic or divine visions, but he knew that the jungle could hold treasures, or traps, if you were clever enough. It wasn't long before they encountered their first obstacle. A low, guttural growl echoed through the trees, and the air grew unnaturally still. Elowen froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the staff that hung at her side. Kael's hand gripped the hilt of his sword, his expression darkening as he muttered a prayer under his breath.
What in the hells was that?
Thorne asked, his voice low and cautious. He reached for a dagger, his sharp eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. From the shadows between the trees, something large moved. The underbrush rustled, and a massive shape emerged into the clearing. At first, It was a blur of motion, but as it drew closer, they saw it clearly. A hulking creature, its body covered in scales that shimmered in shades of green and gold. Its eyes gleamed like molten amber, and its jaws were lined with sharp teeth, dripping with saliva.
A drake?
Elowen whispered, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard of such creatures in ancient texts, but seeing one in person was a different experience altogether. The drake let out a roar that shook the ground beneath them, and its massive tail lashed through the air, knocking a nearby tree aside like it was made of paper. It was clearly hungry, and they were the prey. Kael stepped forward, his holy symbol glowing with a soft, radiant light.
Stand back!
He commanded, raising his hand.
I'll keep it at bay.
But Elowen wasn't sure that would be enough. Her heart pounded as she could feel the weight of the drake's presence. Its ancient magic intertwined with the pulse of the land itself. They weren't just facing a beast. They were facing something deeply tied to the power of the jungle, something that the land had summoned to test them.
We have to move now.
Thorne hissed, his voice sharp as he sprang into action, drawing his blades.
If this is a test, let's pass it with style.
With that, chaos erupted. The drake charged, its massive jaws snapping just inches from Kael as he raised his shield in defense. Elowen's mind raced as she began to weave a spell, but before she could unleash it, Thorne was already moving, darting forward with swift, precise movements, his daggers slashing at the drake's vulnerable underbelly. The beast roared in pain, but it was far from defeated. Elowen felt the magic surge within her, the power of the land itself thrumming beneath her feet. She gathered it, ready to unleash a burst of arcane energy. The jungle, alive with its ancient magic, responded to her command. With a crack of lightning and a flash of blinding light, Elowen sent a blast of raw energy toward the drake, knocking it back several paces. The creature reeled, momentarily stunned by the force of her magic. Kael shouted a prayer, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. His shield glowed brighter, and he stepped forward, summoning the strength of his faith to protect them. The battle was fierce, but together they pushed back the drake. Thorne's speed and cunning kept it off balance. Kael's divine magic shielded them from its devastating blows, and Elowen's power dealt the final blow, sending the beast fleeing back into the jungle, its roars echoing into the distance. As the dust settled, the three companions stood in the clearing, panting from the battle. They exchanged wary glances, knowing that this was only the beginning. The jungle was watching, and whatever it had in store for them next, they would face together.